Introduction. The Gospel of Thomas is a unique and mystifying text. From the circumstances of its composition and discovery to its various translations and contested interpretations, this relatively brief document has intrigued and puzzled scholars, theologians, and laypeople alike. For Christians, the Gospel of Thomas offers an important glimpse into an alternative version of early Christianity and a portrayal of Jesus Christ that differs quite a bit from the canonical Gospels of the New Testament. The sayings attributed to Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas are, in fact, so different from the canonical Gospels and conventional Christian theology that their meaning can be challenging to understand. So if you've ever attempted to read through the Gospel of Thomas on your own, only to be left confused and frustrated, know that you are not alone. Even experts of the text who have dedicated years to studying it will confess to feeling perplexed by many of its passages. The enigmatic nature of the Gospel of Thomas is not an accident, nor is it the product of an unbridgeable cultural gap between our modern-day perspective and that of the text's ancient authors and or readers. It is a text that is very forthcoming about its claim to transmit a secretive and unconventional form of knowledge. The prologue of the Gospel of Thomas refers to its own contents as hidden sayings of Jesus, the first of which reads, "Whoever discovers the meaning of these sayings won't taste death." With such a grand promise, we should hardly expect the process of discovering this Gospel's meaning to be an easy one. All of that said, this book will help you navigate the Gospel of Thomas in a way that will make the text's meaning more accessible. It will not reveal the true meaning to you. There is no singular true meaning to be found. That's not the point of the text. Rather, the Gospel of Thomas invites its readers to seek truth from within. Therefore, the goal of this book is to help you understand some of the context behind the Gospel of Thomas and its cryptic verses, so that you can come up with your own unique interpretations. We will start with some comments on the Gospel of Thomas history, followed by a brief description of a particular philosophical and theological school of thought that is, for many, the key to unlocking the Gospel's meaning. From there, we'll explore some of the recurring images and themes throughout the Gospel of Thomas that will help you make sense of the text as a whole and its individual verses. Historical background. The Gospel of Thomas was among a treasure trove of ancient books and texts discovered near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, in 1945. This collection of ancient writings was initially dug up by a local farmer boy in the desert, and scholars learned of its existence the following year. The collection has come to be known as the Nag Hammadi Library. The Nag Hammadi Library is considered to be one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Why? Because for most of the texts, they were the only surviving copies of a corpus of writings that scholars had been aware of for centuries, but were thought to have disappeared forever. The contents of the Nag Hammadi Library are so significant because they provide a never-before-seen glimpse into the intellectual and theological landscape of early Christianity. Before the Christian beliefs, scriptures, and practices we know today were canonized, there were many Christianities, many different groups of people who sought to record and follow the teachings of Jesus in different ways. Scholars have been hard at work translating the vast corpus of Nag Hammadi texts since they were discovered, and this work continues today. We still don't know everything there is to know about the Nag Hammadi Library. It is, for instance, still not entirely clear why these texts were buried, when each of them was originally composed, and so on. But it's not hard to see why Christian authorities had no interest in searching for these texts or allowing them to see the light of day. Many of them conflict quite starkly with the canonized version of Jesus' teachings, as recorded in the New Testament. The Gospel of Thomas is a treasure among treasures. It's considered by many to be one of the most important of the Nag Hammadi texts, because it very well may be one of the earliest accounts of Jesus' teachings. As you'll see, the Gospel of Thomas contains many parables that will be familiar to those acquainted with the New Testament. But there are variations, omissions, and additions therein, which suggest this Gospel was written independently of the New Testament Gospels. And while the physical Nag Hammadi copy of the Gospel of Thomas has been dated to around 340 AD, the original work was thought to have been composed sometime around 140 AD, less than 100 years after when the New Testament Gospels are thought to have been written. The idea is that both the New Testament Gospels and the Gospel of Thomas were based on the same sources of oral transmission, but committed to writing in different ways. Unlike the New Testament Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas is not considered to have been written by Thomas the Apostle. According to the prologue of the text itself, the Gospel of Thomas contains sayings of Jesus that were written by Didymus Judas Thomas. However, even this name doesn't appear to refer to the literal author of the text. Rather, the name seems to bear symbolic significance. Didymus and Thomas both mean twin in Koine Greek and Aramaic, respectively. The claim, then, seems to be that the Gospel of Thomas is a set of Jesus' teachings recorded by his twin, a literal twin brother, or some disciple who had become a sort of spiritual twin of Jesus by perfectly absorbing and transmitting his wisdom. The last thing to point out about the Nag Hammadi Library is that most of the texts in the collection are considered to be Gnostic texts. Because the Gospel of Thomas was found among them, many scholars feel strongly that the Gospel of Thomas, too, is a Gnostic text and was intentionally composed as such. Many, but not all. This is because the Gospel's content itself seems to align with Gnostic thought in some ways, but not entirely. Still, so much of it seems to be at least influenced by Gnosticism that it is beneficial to understand a little bit about Gnosticism before attempting to decipher the meaning of the Gospel of Thomas. Gnosticism. Like the Gospel of Thomas itself, Gnosticism is far from straightforward, and, in a similar way, intentionally so. That's because Gnosticism is based on the idea that there are secret forms of knowledge that exist beyond ordinary means of knowledge acquisition, like book learning. On top of that, just as there were many Christianities in the early days after Jesus' death, there were many Gnosticisms. It is an eclectic belief system with intellectual roots in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, Jewish mystical theology, and more. As such, there is no clear consensus on what exactly counts as Gnosticism. Still, there are certain broad themes, philosophical ideas, and theological beliefs that are fairly consistent across a body of written works that are generally considered Gnostic. And many of these ideas can be found in the Gospel of Thomas. If much of what follows seems overwhelming at first, do not worry. Gnosticism is highly abstract and complex, and it's okay if you don't understand everything. This section will be available for you to refer to later if you find it helpful, but it is not entirely necessary for understanding the Gospel of Thomas. It's just one particularly useful companion tool for interpreting the text, one that will be employed throughout this book. For the sake of providing a very rough and broad overview, Gnostics believe that the material world we live in is a fundamentally corrupted version of the true world we belong in. Echoing this belief is the idea that the biblical God, the God of Genesis that created the material world, is not the true highest God. The biblical God is merely a demiurge, a being responsible for creating the universe. And insofar as this universe is corrupt, the demiurge is also corrupt, evil even. That's why the Gnostics often visually depicted the demiurge as a snake with a lion's head. It is a vengeful, violent, deceptive, and evil being. The ultimate divinity for Gnostics is referred to as the One, something that is alluded to several times in the Gospel of Thomas. Everything in our universe, including ourselves and the demiurge, is simply a manifestation of the One. The ultimate Gnostic goal is to escape the evil material world and reunite with the One, our true source of creation, which is characterized by goodness. For Gnostics, this is the meaning of the kingdom of heaven. And for those who choose to read the Gospel of Thomas as a Gnostic text, that is the meaning behind the text's many references to the kingdom of heaven. The main problem with this ultimate Gnostic goal is that the One exists outside of our universe. There's no way for us to reach the One or even perceive it in any way with our material senses. That's where the gnosis part comes in. Gnosis is a Greek word that means knowledge, but it has a more specific meaning than that. It's a type of knowledge that can only be acquired through direct personal insight. It must be experienced for oneself. This makes sense. The Gnostics are trying to escape the ordinary material world. They are, therefore, not interested in material objects or knowledge that can be ascertained through the physical senses. This will be an important idea to keep in mind, as it comes up often in the Gospel of Thomas. So, how can a human being attain this Gnostic knowledge or insight into the One? Well, there is no easy, straightforward way. Since we are all descended from the One, we all bear some connection with it. Our soul, spirit, mind's eye, or whatever term you prefer for the inner source of higher insight. The best we can do in this life is to renounce the material world to some extent, thereby clearing away the obstructions blocking that channel between us and the One. From there, a person must be patient and alert to take advantage of the moment when they are chosen to receive that flash of direct insight. That is the moment when they are invited to at least glimpse the kingdom of heaven. To demystify things a bit further, here's how Elaine Pagels, one of the most well-regarded scholars of the Gospel of Thomas, explains the concept of gnosis. The Greeks had two words for knowledge. One is intellectual knowledge, like the knowledge of physics or something like that. But this gnosis is personal, like, I know that person, or do you know so-and-so? So this gnosis is self-knowledge. You could call it insight. It's a question of knowing who you really are, not at the ordinary level of your name and your social class or your position, but knowing yourself at a deep level. The secret of gnosis is that when you know yourself at that level, you will also come to know God, because you will discover that the divine is within you. It is as if we all bear the stamp of the One within us. We cannot know the One directly, but if we know ourselves at the deepest possible level, we can know the One indirectly. We can understand a bit about its essence. This knowledge may not physically teleport us out of this evil material world, but it may allow us to also see the stamp of the One within the rest of the created world, so that, in a sense, we can live in the kingdom of heaven while still alive on earth. One last thing to note about Gnosticism is that it has garnered renewed popularity, or at least interest, in modern times. Think about when the Gnostic texts of the Nag Hammadi Library were discovered. The year was 1945, the same year that World War II ended. Humanity had just bore witness to two unprecedented world wars and the genocidal atrocities of the Holocaust. These events had an irreversible impact on the human experience of morality and our collective worldview more broadly. The material world revealed its true depth of ugliness and evil. Many people lost faith in God. It's no wonder why Gnosticism captured people's interests. It offered a compelling form of theodicy, an answer to the problem of evil. One could hang on to faith in the divine while still rejecting the God or demiurge which had created the material universe and seemingly turned its back on the immense human suffering of the 20th century. For similar reasons, the Gnostic worldview continues to find sympathy among people today, and insofar as the Gospel of Thomas seems to have at least been influenced by Gnostic ideas, this could be one reason why this Gospel, in particular, has captured the modern reader's interest. How to read the Gospel of Thomas. Recurring themes and images. The Gospel of Thomas does not constitute a linear narrative. It's not telling a story of Jesus' life like the canonical Gospels of the New Testament. For that reason, it might be more useful to approach the text more like a piece of poetry. Like poetry, the verses of the Gospel of Thomas were composed in a particular order for a particular reason. But that doesn't mean you should expect the verses to read like building blocks, where each one helps you to understand the next one. Oftentimes, with poetry, the verses that bring the most clarity, that are the easiest to comprehend, and that help you. Part 1. The text. The Gospel of Thomas. Prologue. These are the hidden sayings that the living Jesus spoke, and Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down. Saying 1. True meaning. And he said, whoever discovers the meaning of these sayings won't taste death. Saying 2. Seek and find. Jesus said, whoever seeks shouldn't stop until they find. When they find, they'll be disturbed. When they're disturbed, they'll be amazed and reign over the all. Saying 3. Seeking within. Jesus said, if your leaders tell you, look, the kingdom is in heaven, then the birds of heaven will precede you. If they tell you it's in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you'll be known, and you'll realize that you're the children of the living Father. But if you don't know yourselves, then you live in poverty, and you are the poverty. Saying 4, first and last. Jesus said, the older person won't hesitate to ask a little 7-day-old child about the place of life, and they'll live, because many who are first will be last, and they'll become one. Saying 5, hidden and revealed. Jesus said, know what's in front of your face, and what's hidden from you will be revealed to you, because there's nothing hidden that won't be revealed. Saying 6, public ritual. His disciples said to him, do you want us to fast? And how should we pray? Should we make donations? And what food should we avoid? Jesus said, don't lie, and don't do what you hate, because everything is revealed in the sight of heaven. For there's nothing hidden that won't be revealed, and nothing covered up that will stay secret. Saying 7, the lion and the human. Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion that's eaten by a human and then becomes human. But how awful for the human who's eaten by a lion and the lion becomes human." Saying 8, the parable of the fish. He said, "The human being is like a wise fisher who cast a net into the sea and drew it out from the sea full of little fish. Among them, the wise fisher found a fine, large fish and cast all the little fish back down into the sea, easily choosing the large fish. Anyone who has ears to hear should hear." Saying 9, the parable of the sower. Jesus said, "Look, a sower went out, took a handful of seeds and scattered them. Some fell on the roadside. The birds came and gathered them. Others fell on the rock. They didn't take root in the soil, and ears of grain didn't rise toward heaven. Yet others fell on thorns. They choked the seeds, and the worms ate them. Finally, others fell on good soil. It produced fruit up toward heaven, some 60 times as much, and some 120. Saying 10, Jesus and fire. 1. Jesus said, "I've cast fire on the world, and look, I'm watching over it until it blazes." Saying 11, those who are living won't die. 1. Jesus said, "This heaven will disappear, and the one above it will disappear too. Those who are dead aren't alive, and those who are living won't die. In the days when you ate what was dead, you made it alive. When you're in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became divided, but when you become divided, what will you do?" Saying 12, James the just. The disciples said to Jesus, "We know you're going to leave us. Who will lead us then?" Jesus said to them, "Wherever you are, you'll go to James the just, for whom heaven and earth came into being." Saying 13, Thomas' confession. Jesus said to his disciples, "If you were to compare me to someone, who would you say I'm like?" Simon Peter said to him, "You're like a just angel." Matthew said to him, "You're like a wise philosopher." Thomas said to him, "Teacher, I'm completely unable to say whom you're like." Jesus said, "I'm not your teacher. Because you've drunk, you've become intoxicated by the bubbling spring I've measured out." He took him aside and told him 3 things. When Thomas returned to his companions, they asked, "What did Jesus say to you?" He said to them, "If I tell you one of the things he said to me, you'll pick up stones and cast them at me, and fire will come out of the stones and burn you up." Saying 14, public ministry. Jesus said to them, "If you fast, you'll bring guilt upon yourselves, and if you pray, you'll be condemned, and if you make donations, you'll harm your spirits. If they welcome you when you enter any land and go around in the countryside, heal those who are sick among them, and eat whatever they give you, because it's not what goes into your mouth that will defile you. What comes out of your mouth is what will defile you." Saying 15, worship. Jesus said, "When you see the one who wasn't born of a woman, fall down on your face and worship that person. That's your Father." Saying 16, not peace, but war. Jesus said, Many people think that I've come to cast peace on the earth, and they don't know that I've come to cast divisions on the earth, fire, sword, and war. Where there are 5 in a house, there'll be 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. Father against and son against father. They'll stand up and be one. Saying 17, divine gift. Jesus said, I'll give you what no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, no hand has ever touched, and no human mind has ever thought. Saying 18, beginning and end. The disciples said to Jesus, tell us about our end. How will it come? Jesus said, have you discovered the beginning so that you can look for the end? Because the end will be where the beginning is. Blessed is the one who will stand up in the beginning. They'll know the end and won't taste death. Saying 19, 5 trees in paradise. Jesus said, blessed is the one who came into being before coming into being. If you become my disciples and listen to my message, these stones will become your servants. Because there are 5 trees in paradise which don't change in summer or winter, and their leaves don't fall, whoever knows them won't taste death. Saying 20, the parable of the mustard seed. The disciples asked Jesus, tell us, what can the kingdom of heaven be compared to? He said to them, it can be compared to a mustard seed. Though it's the smallest of all the seeds, when it falls on tilled soil, it makes a plant so large that it shelters the birds of heaven. Saying 21, the parables of the field, the bandits, and the reaper. Mary said to Jesus, whom are your disciples like? He said, they're like little children living in a field which isn't theirs. When the owners of the field come, they'll say, give our field back to us. They'll strip naked in front of them to let them have it and give them their field. So I say that if the owner of the house realizes the bandit is coming, they'll watch out beforehand and won't let the bandit break into the house of their domain and steal their possessions. You, then, watch out for the world. Prepare to defend yourself so that the bandits don't attack you, because what you're expecting will come. May there be a wise person among you. When the fruit is ripened, the reaper came quickly, sickle in hand, and harvested it. Anyone who has ears to hear should hear. Saying 22, making the 2 into 1. Jesus saw some little children nursing. He said to his disciples, these nursing children can be compared to those who enter the kingdom. They said to him, then we'll enter the kingdom as little children? Jesus said to them, when you make the 2 into 1, and make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and so make the male and the female a single one, so that the male won't be male nor the female female. When you make eyes in the place of an eye, a hand in the place of a hand, a foot in the place of a foot, and an image in the place of an image, then you'll enter the kingdom. Saying 23, those who are chosen, 1. Jesus said, I'll choose you, 1 out of 1,000, and 2 out of 10,000, and they'll stand as a single one. Saying 24, light. His disciples said, show us the place where you are, because we need to look for it. He said to them, anyone who has ears to hear should hear. Light exists within a person of light, and they light up the whole world. If they don't shine, there's darkness. Saying 25, love and protect. Jesus said, love your brother as your own soul. Protect them like the pupil of your eye. Saying 26, speck and beam. Jesus said, you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you don't see the beam in your own eye. When you get the beam out of your own eye, then you'll be able to see clearly to get the speck out of your brother's eye. Saying 27, fasting and Sabbath. If you don't fast from the world, you won't find the kingdom. If you don't make the Sabbath into a Sabbath, you won't see the Father. Saying 28, the world is drunk. Jesus said, I stood in the middle of the world and appeared to them in the flesh. I found them all drunk. I didn't find any of them thirsty. My soul ached for the children of humanity because they were blind in their hearts and couldn't see. They came into the world empty and plan on leaving the world empty. Meanwhile, they're drunk. When they shake off their wine, then they'll change. Saying 29, spirit and body. Jesus said, if the flesh came into existence because of spirit, that's amazing. If spirit came into existence because of the body, that's really amazing. But I'm amazed at how such great wealth has been placed in this poverty. Saying 30, divine presence. Jesus said, where there are three deities, they're divine. Where there are two or one, I'm with them. Saying 31, prophet and doctor. Jesus said, no prophet is welcome in their own village. No doctor heals those who know them. Saying 32, the parable of the fortified city. Jesus said, a city built and fortified on a high mountain can't fall, nor can it be hidden. Saying 33, the parable of the lamp. Jesus said, what you hear with one ear, listen to with both, then proclaim from your rooftops. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket or in a hidden place. Rather, they put it on the stand, so that everyone who comes and goes can see its light. Saying 34, the parable of those who can't see. Jesus said, if someone who's blind leads someone else who's blind, both of them fall into a pit. Saying 35, the parable of binding the strong. Jesus said, no one can break into the house of the strong and take it by force without tying the hands of the strong. Then they can loot the house. Saying 36, anxiety. Jesus said, don't be anxious from morning to evening or from evening to morning about what you'll wear. Saying 37, seeing Jesus. His disciples said, when will you appear to us? When will we see you? Jesus said, when you strip naked without being ashamed and throw your clothes on the ground and stomp on them as little children would, then you'll see the Son of the Living One and won't be afraid. Saying 38, finding Jesus. Jesus said, often you've wanted to hear this message that I'm telling you, and you don't have anyone else from whom to hear it. There will be days when you'll look for me, but you won't be able to find me. Saying 39, the keys of knowledge. Jesus said, the Pharisees and the scholars have taken the keys of knowledge and hidden them. They haven't entered and haven't let others enter who wanted to. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Saying 40, a grapevine. Jesus said, a grapevine has been planted outside of the Father. since it's malnourished, it'll be pulled up by its roots and destroyed. Saying 41, more and less. Jesus said, whoever has something in hand will be given more, but whoever doesn't have anything will lose even what little they do have. Saying 42, passing by. Jesus said, become passers-by. Saying 43, the tree and the fruit. His disciples said to him, who are you to say these things to us? You don't realize who I am from what I say to you, but you've become like those Judeans who either love the tree but hate its fruit, or love the fruit but hate the tree. Saying 44, blasphemy. Jesus said, whoever blasphemes the Father will be forgiven, and whoever blasphemes the Son will be forgiven. But whoever blasphemes the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, neither on earth nor in heaven. Saying 45, good and evil. Jesus said, grapes aren't harvested from thorns, nor are figs gathered from thistles, because they don't produce fruit. A person who's good brings good things out of their treasure, and a person who's evil brings evil things out of their evil treasure. They say evil things because their heart is full of evil. Saying 46, greater than John the Baptizer. Jesus said, from Adam to John the Baptizer, no one's been born who's so much greater than John the Baptizer that they shouldn't avert their eyes. But I say that whoever among you will become a little child will know the kingdom and become greater than John. Saying 47, the parables of divided loyalties, new wine in old wineskins, and new patch on old cloth. Jesus said, it's not possible for anyone to mount 2 horses or stretch 2 bows, and it's not possible for a servant to follow 2 leaders, because they'll respect one and despise the other. No one drinks old wine and immediately wants to drink new wine, and new wine isn't put in old wineskins because they'd burst, nor is old wine put in new wineskins because it'd spoil. A new patch of cloth isn't sewn onto an old coat because it'd tear apart. Saying 48, unity 1. If 2 make peace with each other in a single house, they'll say to the mountain, go away, and it will. Saying 49, those who are chosen. Jesus said, blessed are those who are one, those who are chosen, because you'll find the kingdom. You've come from there and will return there. Saying 50, our origin and identity. Jesus said, if they ask you, where do you come from? Tell them, we come from the light, the place where light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. If they ask you, is it you? Then say, we are its children, and we're chosen by our living Father. If they ask you, what's the sign of your Father in you? Then say, it's movement and rest. Saying 51, the new world. His disciples said to him, when will the dead have rest? And when will the new world come? He said to them, what you're looking for has already come, but you don't know it. Saying 52, 24 prophets. His disciples said to him, 24 prophets have spoken in Israel, and they all spoke of you. He said to them, you've ignored the living one right in front of you, and you've talked about those who are dead. Saying 53, true circumcision. His disciples said to him, is circumcision useful or not? He said to them, if it were useful, parents would have children who were born circumcised. but the true circumcision in spirit has become profitable in every way. Saying 54, those who are poor. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven." Saying 55, discipleship 1. Jesus said, "Whoever doesn't hate their father and mother can't become my disciple. And whoever doesn't hate their brothers and sisters and take up their cross like I do isn't worthy of me." Saying 56, the world is a corpse. Jesus said, "Whoever has known the world has found a corpse. Whoever has found a corpse, of them the world isn't worthy." Saying 57, the parable of the weeds. Jesus said, "My Father's kingdom can be compared to someone who had good seed. Their enemy came by night and sowed weeds among the good seed. The person didn't let anyone pull out the weeds, so that you don't pull out the wheat along with the weeds," they said to them. "On the day of the harvest, the weeds will be obvious. Then they'll be pulled out and burned." Saying 58, finding life. Jesus said, "Blessed is the person who's gone to a lot of trouble. They've found life." Saying 59, the living one. Jesus said, "Look for the living one while you're still alive. If you die and then try to look for him, you won't be able to." Saying 60, don't become a corpse. They saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb to Judea. He said to his disciples, "What do you think he's going to do with that lamb?" They said to him, "He's going to kill it and eat it." He said to them, "While it's living, he won't eat it, but only after he kills it and it becomes a corpse." They said, "He can't do it any other way." He said to them, "You too look for a resting place, so that you won't become a corpse and be eaten." Saying 61, Jesus and Salome. Jesus said, "Two will rest on a couch. One will die, the other will live." Salome said, "Who are you, sir, to climb onto my couch and eat off my table as if you're from someone?" Jesus said to her, "I'm the one who exists in equality. Some of what belongs to my Father was given to me. I'm your disciple. So I'm telling you, if someone is equal, they'll be full of light. But if they're divided, they'll be full of darkness." Saying 62, mysteries. Jesus said, "I tell my mysteries to those who are worthy of my mysteries. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Saying 63, the parable of the rich fool. Jesus said, "There was a rich man who had much money. He said, 'I'll use my money to sow, reap, plant, and fill my barns with fruit, so that I won't need anything.' That's what he was thinking to himself. But he died that very night. Anyone who has ears to hear should hear." Saying 64, the parable of the dinner party. Jesus said, someone was planning on having guests. When dinner was ready, they sent their servant to call the visitors. The servant went to the first and said, "My master invites you." They said, "Some merchants owe me money. They're coming tonight. I need to go and give them instructions. Excuse me from the dinner." The servant went to another one and said, "My master invites you." They said, "I just bought a house and am needed for the day. I won't have time." The servant went to another one and said, "My master invites you." They said, "My friend is getting married and I'm going to make dinner. I can't come. Excuse me from the dinner." The servant went to another one and said, "My master invites you." They said, "I've just bought a farm and am going to collect the rent. I can't come. Excuse me." The servant went back and told the master, "The ones you've invited to the dinner have excused themselves. The master said to the servant, "Go out to the roads and bring whomever you find so that they can have dinner. Buyers and merchants won't enter the places of my Father." Saying 65, the parable of the sharecroppers. He said, a creditor owned a vineyard. He leased it out to some sharecroppers to work it so he could collect its fruit. He sent his servants so that the sharecroppers could give him the fruit of the vineyard. They seized his servant, beat him, and nearly killed him. The servant went back and told his master. His master said, "Maybe he just didn't know then." He sent another servant, but the tenants beat that one too. Then the master sent his son, thinking, maybe they'll show some respect to my son. Because they knew that he was the heir of the vineyard, the sharecroppers seized and killed him. Anyone who has ears to hear should hear. Saying 66, the rejected cornerstone. Jesus said, "Show me the stone the builders rejected. That's the cornerstone." Saying 67, knowing isn't everything. Jesus said, "Whoever knows everything but is personally lacking lacks everything." Saying 68, persecution. Jesus said, "Blessed are you when you're hated and persecuted, and no place will be found where you've been persecuted." Saying 69, those who are persecuted. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who've been persecuted in their own hearts. They've truly known the Father. Blessed are those who are hungry, so that their stomachs may be filled." Saying 70, salvation is within. Jesus said, "If you give birth to what's within you, what you have within you will save you. If you don't have that within you, what you don't have within you will kill you." Saying 71, destroying the temple. Jesus said, "I'll destroy this house, and no one will be able to build it." Saying 72, not a divider. Someone said to him, "Tell my brothers to divide our inheritance with me." He said to him, "Who made me a divider?" He turned to his disciples and said to them, "Am I really a divider?" Saying 73, workers for the harvest. Jesus said, "The harvest really is plentiful, but the workers are few. So pray that the Lord will send workers to the harvest." Saying 74, the empty well. He said, "Lord, many are gathered around the well, but there's nothing to drink." Saying 75, the bridal chamber. Jesus said, "Many are waiting at the door, but those who are won will enter the bridal chamber." Saying 76, the parable of the pearl. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom can be compared to a merchant with merchandise who found a pearl. The merchant was wise. They sold their merchandise and bought that single pearl for themselves. You, too, look for the treasure that doesn't perish but endures, where no moths come to eat and no worms destroy." Saying 77, Jesus is the all. Jesus said, "I'm the light that's over all. I am the all. The all has come from me and unfolds toward me. Split a log? I'm there. Lift a stone, and you'll find me there." Saying 78, into the desert. Jesus said, "What did you go out into the desert to see? A reed shaken by the wind? A person wearing fancy clothes, like your rulers and powerful people? They wear fancy clothes, but can't know the truth." Saying 79, listening to the message. A woman in the crowd said to him, "Blessed is the womb that bore you and the breasts that nourished you." He said to her, "Blessed are those who have listened to the message of the Father and kept it, because there will be days when you'll say, 'Blessed is the womb that didn't conceive and the breasts that haven't given milk.'" Saying 80, the world is a body. Jesus said, "Whoever has known the world has found the body, but whoever has found the body, of them the world isn't worthy." Saying 81, riches and renunciation 1. Jesus said, "Whoever has become rich should become a ruler, and whoever has power should renounce it." Saying 82, Jesus and fire 2. Jesus said, "Whoever is near me is near the fire, and whoever is far from me is far from the kingdom." Saying 83, light and images. Jesus said, "Images are revealed to people, but the light within them is hidden in the image of the Father's light. He'll be revealed, but his image will be hidden by his light." Saying 84, our previous images. Jesus said, "When you see your likeness, you rejoice. But when you see your images that came into being before you did, which don't die and aren't revealed, how much you'll have to bear." Saying 85, Adam wasn't worthy. Jesus said, "Adam came into being from a great power and great wealth, but he didn't become worthy of you. If he had been worthy, he wouldn't have tasted death." Saying 86, foxes and birds. Jesus said, "The foxes have dens, and the birds have nests, but the Son of Humanity has nowhere to lay his head and rest." Saying 87, body and soul. Jesus said, "How miserable is the body that depends on a body, and how miserable is the soul that depends on both." Saying 88, angels and prophets. Jesus said, "The angels and the prophets will come to you and give you what belongs to you. You'll give them what you have, and ask yourselves, when will they come and take what is theirs?" Saying 89, inside and outside. Jesus said, "Why do you wash the outside of the cup? Don't you know that whoever created the inside created the outside too?" Saying 90, Jesus' yoke is easy. Jesus said, "Come to me, because my yoke is easy, and my requirements are light. You'll be refreshed." Saying 91, reading the signs. They said to him, "Tell us who you are, so that we may trust you." He said to them, "You read the face of the sky and the earth, but you don't know the one right in front of you, and you don't know how to read the present moment." Saying 92, look and find. Jesus said, "Look and you'll find." I didn't answer your questions before. Now I want to give you answers, but you aren't looking for them. Saying 93, don't throw pearls to pigs. Don't give what's holy to the dogs, or else it might be thrown on the manure pile. Don't throw pearls to the pigs, or else they might. Saying 94, knock and it will be opened. Jesus said, whoever looks will find, and whoever knocks, it will be opened for them. Saying 95, giving money. Jesus said, if you have money, don't lend it at interest. Instead, give it to someone from whom you won't get it back. Saying 96, the parable of the yeast. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom can be compared to a woman who took a little yeast and hid it in the flour. She made it into large loaves of bread. Anyone who has ears to hear should hear." Saying 97, the parable of the jar of flour. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom can be compared to a woman carrying a jar of flour. While she was walking down a long road, the jar's handle broke, and the flour spilled out behind her on the road. She didn't know it, and she didn't realize there was a problem until she got home and put down the jar and found it empty." Saying 98, the parable of the assassin. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom can be compared to a man who wanted to kill someone powerful. He drew his sword in his house and drove it into the wall to figure out whether his hand was strong enough. Then he killed the powerful one." Saying 99, Jesus' true family. The disciples said to him, "Your brothers and mother are standing outside." He said to them, "The people here who do the will of my Father are my brothers and mother. They're the ones who will enter my Father's kingdom." Saying 100, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar." They showed Jesus a gold coin and said to him, "Those who belong to Caesar demand a tribute from us." He said to them, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what belongs to God. And give to me what belongs to me." Saying 101, Discipleship 2. "Whoever doesn't hate their father and mother as I do can't become my disciple. And whoever doesn't love their father and mother as I do can't become my disciple. For my mother, but my true mother gave me life." Saying 102, the dog in the feeding trough. Jesus said, "How awful for the Pharisees who are like a dog sleeping in a feeding trough for cattle, because the dog doesn't eat and doesn't let the cattle eat either." Saying 103, the parable of the bandits. Jesus said, "Blessed is the one who knows where the bandits are going to enter. They can get up to assemble their defenses and be prepared to defend themselves before they arrive." Saying 104, prayer and fasting. They said to Jesus, "Come, let's pray and fast today." Jesus said, "What have I done wrong? Have I failed? Rather, when the groom leaves the bridal chamber, then people should fast and pray." Saying 105, knowing father and mother. Jesus said, "Whoever knows their father and mother will be called a bastard." Saying 106, unity. Jesus said, "When you make the two into one, you'll become children of humanity, and if you say, 'Mountain, go away,' it'll go." Saying 107, the parable of the lost sheep. Jesus said, "The kingdom can be compared to a shepherd who had 100 sheep. The largest one strayed. He left the 99 and looked for that one until he found it. Having gone through the trouble, he said to the sheep, 'I love you more than the 99. Saying 108, becoming like Jesus. Jesus said, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me, and I myself will become like them. Then what's hidden will be revealed to them." Saying 109, the parable of the hidden treasure. Jesus said, "The kingdom can be compared to someone who had a treasure hidden in their field. They didn't know about it. After they died, they left it to their son. The son didn't know it either. He took the field and sold it. The buyer plowed the field, found the treasure, and began to loan money at interest to whomever they wanted. Saying 110, riches and renunciation 2. Jesus said, whoever has found the world and become rich should renounce the world. Saying 111, those who are living won't die 2. Jesus said, the heavens and the earth will roll up in front of you, and whoever lives from the living one won't see death. Doesn't Jesus say, whoever finds themselves, of them the world isn't worthy? Saying 112, flesh and soul. Jesus said, how awful for the flesh that depends on the soul. How awful for the soul that depends on the flesh. Saying 113, the kingdom is already present. His disciples said to him, when will the kingdom come? It won't come by looking for it. They won't say, look over here or look over there. Rather, the Father's kingdom is already spread out over the earth, and people don't see it. Saying 114, Peter and Mary. Simon Peter said to them, Mary should leave us, because women aren't worthy of life. Jesus said, look, am I to make her a man, so that she may become a living spirit too? She's equal to you men, because every woman who makes herself manly will enter the kingdom of heaven. The Gospel according to Thomas. Part 2, Commentary, The Light. There are a few reasons why it makes sense to start with the recurring image of the light in the Gospel of Thomas. First, it is one of the most accessible themes to understand, because what light represents in this text is pretty similar to what light represents in many other religious texts: divinity, creation, truth, and revelation. Given the grand nature of these principles, light is central to the Gospel of Thomas' most critical messages. That is the second reason for starting with the image of light. The third is that light is also a central image in Gnosticism. Examining light in the Gospel of Thomas will, therefore, help to further elucidate some of the main ideas of Gnosticism, which will be applicable to other parts of this Gospel. Saying 50 in the Gospel of Thomas offers one of the most direct instances of light being equated to the ultimate divinity, the living Father, who is the source of creation. Saying 50, our origin and identity. Jesus said, "If they ask you, 'Where do you come from?' tell them, 'We come from the light,' the place where light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. If they ask you, 'Is it you?' then say, 'We are its children, and we're chosen by our living Father.' If they ask you, 'What's the sign of your Father in you?' then say, 'It's movement and rest.'" This passage is littered with elements that are ripe for Gnostic interpretation. Recall that, according to Gnostic thought, the biblical God who created the physical universe is a lesser God, a demiurge. When saying 50 notes that light came into being by itself, it is referencing the belief that there is a higher divinity, which was uncreated. It established itself and is the source of all other creation. This ultimate divinity is often referred to by Gnostics as the One. In the Gospel of Thomas, it is also referred to as the living Father. As children of the light, who appeared in the image of light, humans contain some of this divine essence within. In this case, the Father is living within us. As for being chosen, this too is a common refrain in Gnosticism. The revelatory experience of insight into the divine is only granted to a select few. Here, Jesus is speaking to his disciples, noting that they are among those chosen to receive this special knowledge, or at least have the potential to receive it. Finally, the movement and rest part, which comes up elsewhere in the Gospel of Thomas, is best explained with the aid of another passage. Consider saying 77, Jesus is the all. Jesus said, "I'm the light that's over all. I am the all. The all has come from me and unfolds toward me. Split a log? I'm there. Lift a stone, and you'll find me there." For Gnostics, the ultimate divinity is marked by oneness. It's the only thing that came into being on its own, and is therefore the source of all creation. The specific form of light that is sometimes employed as a metaphor in other Gnostic texts is the sun. The One is like the sun, the light of which is split into many rays that descend upon earth. The goal of the Gnostic is to reverse this flow, ascending up to the rays to reunite with the sun, the original source of oneness. Here, Jesus is equating himself with the One, the Father. All of creation and everything on earth comes from him. The proclamation that everything comes from him and unfolds toward him may very well be referencing this Gnostic quest, which is marked by movement and rest, moving back toward the One, the ultimate place of rest. Moreover, Jesus' two examples of earthly objects that contain the light are not accidental. He could have chosen anything because everything on earth comes from the light. But he deliberately chooses two objects, not because of their identity, but because of their associated movements. The splitting of a log is emblematic of how the one split into the all, and the lifting of the stone references the fact that the light on earth is hidden, with hiddenness being a recurring theme of its own throughout the Gospel of Thomas. Let's turn our attention to saying 83, which establishes a relationship between light and hiddenness. Saying 83, light and images. Jesus said, "Images are revealed to people, but the light within them is hidden in the image of the Father's light. He'll be revealed, but his image will be hidden by his light." This saying is another example of why Gnostics often invoke the Son as a metaphor for the One, though it is not invoked as such here or anywhere else in the Gospel of Thomas. Still, we can employ it here for our own purposes. Gnostics liken the One to the Son, because like the Son, we cannot directly see it. We can only see the light that emanates from it indirectly through the images and objects it illuminates. The light spoken of in the Gospel of Thomas created and illuminates everything on earth. Because of it, we can see images of earthly objects, but we cannot see the image of the light itself. The Father is obscured by its own blinding light. Therefore, we cannot see the Father directly, but we can see it indirectly in everything on earth that it touches. Finally, we'll close with saying 24, simply titled Light. Saying 24, Light. His disciples said, "Show us the place where you are, because we need to look for it." He said to them, "Anyone who has ears to hear should hear. Light exists within a person of light, and they light up the whole world. If they don't shine, there's darkness." At first, the question the disciples asked seems strange and seems to be ignored by Jesus. If they are conversing with Jesus, presumably he's right there in front of them. Why are they asking where to find him? As we saw, Jesus identifies himself with the living Father. The question makes more sense in this context. Where is the living Father, the One, the source of the light of creation? Jesus suggests that the place to look is within. We've already seen how Jesus refers to himself as a person of light who lights up the whole world. The question is, can his disciples too, who have been chosen as children of light and created in the likeness of its image, also become people of light? What would this look like? How would this be accomplished? These questions bring us to our next theme. The kingdom. The Gospel of Thomas begins with a challenge for the reader. Discover the true meaning of these hidden sayings of Jesus. A quick 10-minute skim of the rest of the Gospel of Thomas will reveal many more instances of this plea. Your eyes will catch certain repeated words like discover, find, and seek all the way through to the end of the text, with saying 94 being another succinct and straightforward example that comes to mind. Saying 94, knock and it will be opened. Jesus said, "Whoever looks will find, and whoever knocks, it will be opened for them." Which raises the question, what is Jesus urging his disciples to look for? As we saw in saying 24, the disciples, like us, want answers. They want to know what they should be seeking and where to look for it. And though the Jesus of the Gospel of Thomas can be quite dodgy and cryptic when it comes to answers, there are many verses where he does address these fundamental questions, starting with saying 3, seeking within. Saying 3, seeking within. Jesus said, "If your leaders tell you, 'Look, the kingdom is in heaven, then the birds of heaven will precede you. If they tell you it's in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you'll be known, and you'll realize that you're the children of the living Father. But if you don't know yourselves, then you live in poverty, and you are the poverty. In canonical Christianity, the kingdom of heaven is a state of salvation, where those who follow Jesus will attain eternal life. In the Gospel of Thomas, the kingdom is similar. It is the main goal of spiritual attainment, and it is a goal that, in some way, will prevent us from tasting death, as saying 1 proclaims. The first part of saying 3 makes it clear that we shouldn't be seeking the kingdom in the external material world. It is not in the sky, and it is not in the sea. But just as the sky is the bird's home and the sea is the fish's home, our home is within us. We're meant to explore within ourselves, just as birds are meant to fly and fish are meant to swim. But the kingdom is also outside of us. It's not at a fixed place like the sky or the sea, but is rather all around us. It is the kingdom of the living Father, whose light resides within us, but is also spread across all of creation. We are spared from tasting death when we know ourselves as deeply as possible, because we then realize our connection to the living Father, the one that is imperishable. This realization is the ultimate gnosis, the kingdom within that we must seek. And when we find the kingdom within, we will see the kingdom in the external world as well. Our inner light will be revealed and light up the rest of the world. That is what Jesus means in the penultimate saying 1:13, when he says that the kingdom is already here. Saying 1:13, the kingdom is already present. His disciples said to him, "When will the kingdom come?" It won't come by looking for it. They won't say, "Look over here," or "Look over there." Rather, the Father's kingdom is already spread out over the earth, and people don't see it. Again, we're told, one last time, that the kingdom is not some physical place you can look for or travel to. Instead, the path of spiritual attainment depends on learning to see the world with new eyes. Not our normal material eyes, but our inner eyes that illuminate the world with the light of the living Father. In saying 2, we get an overarching summary of what the process of seeking and finding the kingdom is like. Saying 2, seek and find. Jesus said, whoever seeks shouldn't stop until they find. When they find, they'll be disturbed. When they're disturbed, they'll be amazed and reign over the all. The main message here is a plea for persistence. Those who wish to find the kingdom should not give up so easily. They should seek until they find it. But even at the point of discovery, some persistence is required. We're told that the initial discovery is disturbing. It must be disturbing at first to see the world we're so familiar with through entirely new eyes. Suddenly we realize we've been sleepwalking. Suddenly we wake up and may feel disoriented. The important thing is to push through that initial state of discomfort to actually enter into the kingdom. Knowing and accepting our identity as the children of light who rightfully rule over all. We see other pleas for persistence throughout the Gospel of Thomas, as in sayings 38 and 92, when Jesus speaks directly to his disciples. Saying 38, finding Jesus. Jesus said, often you've wanted to hear this message that I'm telling you, and you don't have anyone else from whom to hear it. There will be days when you'll look for me, but you won't be able to find me. Saying 92, look and find. Jesus said, look and you'll find. I didn't answer your questions before. Now I want to give you answers. Hidden treasure. As we just saw, Jesus' sayings in the Gospel of Thomas made it clear that he wants his disciples to seek the kingdom. After combing through some of the sayings that directly describe the kingdom, we know a bit more about what the kingdom is and where it is. It is the place within us that shares an identity and connection with the living Father. Likened to light, the kingdom is here and now spread across the earth like the rays of the sun. But to see it, we must first find the kingdom within. The next cluster of sayings we'll be examining approaches the subject of the kingdom from a different angle. Whereas the previous section told us more about the relationship between the living Father, the kingdom outside of us, and the kingdom within us, now we start to learn more about the kingdom within specifically. Through a series of parables, we get a sense of what the experience of finding the kingdom within is like. Repeatedly, it is said to be like finding some kind of hidden treasure. But just as we need special eyes to see the external kingdom of heaven, it takes a trained eye to discover the kingdom within. Otherwise, we may have the treasure within our reach but fail to take hold of it. As mentioned in our introduction, recall that the parables in the Gospel of Thomas are not intentional alterations of the parables from the New Testament Gospels, but rather independently recorded versions of the teachings of Jesus that were being circulated orally after his death. One example of this early on in the Gospel of Thomas is a parable reminiscent of the parable of the fishing net from the New Testament. Saying 8, the parable of the fish. He said, "The human being is like a wise fisher who cast a net into the sea and drew it out from the sea full of little fish. Among them, the wise fisher found a fine, large fish and cast all the little fish back down into the sea, easily choosing the large fish." Anyone who has ears to hear should hear. The wise fisher demonstrates an ability to spot one large fish from among many small fish, as well as a comprehension of that one large fish as being far more valuable than all the small fish combined. Seeking the truth, represented by the large fish, depends on a person's ability to filter out the noise, so to speak. From a Gnostic perspective, the small fish can be seen as the many distractions of the material world, including the inferior forms of knowledge, like book learning or sensory experience. This parable urges seekers of the kingdom to prioritize quality over quantity. Finding the kingdom within is not about acquiring as much knowledge as possible, but rather discarding all the conventional knowledge that we have acquired to allow the more important truth to shine through. A similar message can be found in saying 107, which is an alternate version of another New Testament parable. Saying 107, the parable of the lost sheep. Jesus said, "The kingdom can be compared to a shepherd who had 100 sheep. The largest one strayed. He left the 99 and looked for that one until he found it. Having gone through the trouble, he said to the sheep, 'I love you more than the 99. We spend all our lives trying to accumulate and retain as much information as possible, protectively herding our knowledge like sheep. The Jesus of the Gospel of Thomas says, once again, follow the big truth, the large fish or large sheep, and leave all the little, lesser forms of knowledge behind. To some extent, we can even apply this idea to the text itself. The Gospel of Thomas contains all these cryptic words. We cast our net out and read through all of it, but the goal of the author is to convey a meaning that goes deeper than the surface meaning of these words. As we're reading, we're supposed to be on the lookout for that large fish or wandering sheep. If and when we find it, the rest of the words no longer matter. With saying 76, we again see some familiar words of Jesus, but within the context of the Gospel of Thomas, we're asked to think about this parable in a different way. Saying 76, the parable of the pearl, Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom can be compared to a merchant with merchandise who found a pearl. The merchant was wise. They sold their merchandise and bought that single pearl for themselves. You, too, look for the treasure that doesn't perish but endures, where no moths come to eat and no worms destroy." Once again, the message is to discard all of one's lesser treasures, to obtain and care for the single large one that matters most. But this time, we're given a bit more insight into the nature of this treasure. It is a treasure that doesn't perish. Ordinary human knowledge does not endure. New experiences cause us to rethink our assumptions in life. New scientific discoveries upend previously held worldviews. The Jesus of the Gospel of Thomas speaks of a form of truth that does endure. Recall saying 1, which claims that those who discover the deeper meaning of the Gospel of Thomas' sayings will not taste death. As with the rest of this Gospel, it would be naive to only consider the literal meaning here. What does it mean to not taste death? Does it mean that your body will not physically die? Or does it mean something else? The treasure that does not die is the pearl, the large sheep, the large fish. A truly wise person doesn't taste the little fish. Such a person doesn't taste death because they don't bother with things that die. They don't bother with fallible human knowledge that is bound to undergo change. But might it also be true that the wise person doesn't taste physical death? Who is the I that dies? Ordinarily, people locate their sense of self in the physical body. This I surely will die. But is there a part of us that is imperishable, that does endure? If we could locate that thing and shift our sense of identity to rest in that thing rather than our physical body, then we would not taste death. The kingdom in the Gospel of Thomas, like the kingdom of heaven in the New Testament, does confer a type of eternal life. When you find the kingdom within, you enter back into relation with the living Father, the source of all creation that is imperishable and has no beginning nor end. The key to this kingdom is to seek out and recognize the imperishable truth within us. This is a very Gnostic idea. Consider a couple more parables about the nature of the kingdom. Sayings 109 and 97. Saying 109, the parable of the hidden treasure. Jesus said, "The kingdom can be compared to someone who had a treasure hidden in their field. They didn't know about it. After they died, they left it to their son. The son didn't know it either. He took the field and sold it. The buyer plowed the field, found the treasure, and began to loan money at interest to whomever they wanted." Saying 97, the parable of the jar of flour. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom can be compared to a woman carrying a jar of flour. While she was walking down a long road, the jar's handle broke, and the flour spilled out behind her on the road. She didn't know it, and she didn't realize there was a problem until she got home and put down the jar and found it empty." Saying 109 is a bit easier to dissect, so we'll start there. Unlike the wise fisher or shepherd or merchant, the owner of this field failed to perceive and obtain the treasure that was within reach. The field can be thought of as something like knowledge of the world or traditional religious teachings. In either case, this knowledge is passed on from generation to generation. Those who possess this knowledge can profit from it to some extent, selling the field in this case, but the one who penetrates into the deeper levels of meaning, the buyer reaps vastly greater benefits. The treasure buried within the field is imperishable in the sense that it becomes a near infinite source of income in the form of interest-based loans. The woman with the flour jar also squanders something of value that was within her possession. In this case, it's not that she failed to obtain the flour. She just failed to hold on to it, and thus couldn't make use of it when the time came. If we think of the long road as representing her journey through life, the treasure she held, the imperishable part of our inner self, the soul that connects us to the divine, gradually dwindled away. By the end of the journey, representing death, the undeveloped soul was merely an empty vessel. As Jesus puts it in saying 95, look for the living one while you're still alive. If you die and then try to look for him, you won't be able to. What these parables have in common, in addition to the sense of squandering a treasure, is a sense of urgency to take advantage of the present moment. It's as though the treasure, the soul or innermost self, is not intrinsically imperishable, but rather must be converted into something more enduring. The treasure in the field became an enduring source of income. The flour, if it made it home safely, could have been an enduring source of food. Saying 96 supports this. It also recounts a parable of a woman with flour, again with the claim that this parable illustrates something important about the kingdom. In this case, the woman took a little yeast and hid it in the flour. She made it into large loaves of bread. The little treasure that is hidden within something yields great outward rewards. Likewise, those who find the kingdom within will be able to transmute their souls into something expansive, like the image of the inner light that illuminates and reigns over all. We began this section with a reflection on the need to train oneself to perceive the hidden treasure, the kingdom within. This next theme will further delve into the idea of cultivating oneself in a way that will be conducive to seeking out the kingdom. Seeds and roots. By now it should be clear that the Jesus presented in the Gospel of Thomas is trying to shift the focus of his disciples from concerns of the external world to what lies within them, for that is where and how they will find the kingdom. In saying 20, the author of the Gospel of Thomas presents a version of the well-known mustard seed parable. Saying 20, the parable of the mustard seed. The disciples asked Jesus, "Tell us, what can the kingdom of heaven be compared to?" He said to them, "It can be compared to a mustard seed. Though it's the smallest of all the seeds, when it falls on tilled soil, it makes a plant so large that it shelters the birds of heaven." Like the mustard seed, the treasure that lies within may seem insignificant at first. Indeed, we've seen several parables that suggest people may go through life missing the treasure entirely. However, like the woman who makes large bread loaves out of a small amount of yeast, the mustard seed blossoms into a massive plant if cultivated properly. The imagery of seeds and roots running throughout the Gospel of Thomas is meant to reinforce the idea that the treasure within must be cultivated. The key to ensuring this process comes to fruition is, as the parable of the mustard seed suggests, planting the seed in tilled soil. Tilling soil involves breaking up and overturning topsoil to create pockets for nutrients like air and water to penetrate deeper down toward the seed. The disciples are being told they need to essentially crack themselves open a bit, overturning what they've already been taught. This is why Jesus is constantly shooting down his disciples' requests to learn more about things that concern the external world, like where to look for Jesus or which rituals to perform. There are also many passages in the Gospel of Thomas that, to varying degrees of straightforwardness, call upon disciples to let go of material goods and pursuits. Just before the parable of the mustard seed comes the cryptic saying 19. Because its message is not straightforward, interpretations differ. Saying 19, 5 trees in paradise. Jesus said, "Blessed is the one who came into being before coming into being. If you become my disciples and listen to my message, these stones will become your servants." Because there are 5 trees in paradise which don't change in summer or winter, and their leaves don't fall, whoever knows them won't taste death. One way to interpret this is to see the 5 trees which don't change as spiritual or Gnostic counterparts to the 5 bodily senses. When read this way, Jesus' message is to reject knowledge gained through the 5 bodily senses, as they can only perceive knowledge about the material world, which is marked for death. The parallel 5 senses, which are not subjected to death, are the ones that allow us to return to the One, the living Father, the state of being before coming into being. When the bodily senses are rejected, symbolized by tilling soil, the vacant spaces, like air pockets in soil, can be filled with the superior spiritual senses that provide nutrients necessary for the seed of the kingdom within to grow. Saying 93 conveys the familiar warning about not throwing pearls to swine. Similarly, saying 40 recounts what will happen if something is planted in improper soil. Saying 40, a grapevine. Jesus said, "A grapevine has been planted outside of the Father. Since it's malnourished, it'll be pulled up by its roots and destroyed." In both cases, the message is that Jesus' secret teachings in the Gospel of Thomas will be useless, tainted even, if shared with those who have not tilled their soil by renouncing their ordinary material concerns and conventional knowledge of the world. Like the grapevine of saying 40, such people will end up destroying the treasure they hold within. Contrastingly, those who till their soil can be sure that their seeds will come to fruition. Even if the growth is slow and imperceptible, their efforts will pay off. Recall the emphasis on persistence from passages we examined earlier. Those who seek should continue seeking, and eventually they are sure to find what they seek. This message is echoed in saying 57. Saying 57, the parable of the weeds, Jesus said, "My Father's kingdom can be compared to someone who had good seed. Their enemy came by night and sowed weeds among the good seed. The person didn't let anyone pull out the weeds, so that you don't pull out the wheat along with the weeds," they said to them. "On the day of the harvest, the weeds will be obvious. Then they'll be pulled out and burned." Outwardly, Jesus' disciples may seem indistinguishable from ordinary people who have not received this secret Gnostic knowledge and are analogous to weeds. These two types of people will coexist, living side by side, but one day their differences will become clear. There are several passages throughout the Gospel of Thomas that convey a sense of danger associated with the path of Jesus' teachings. The image of bandits is employed in such cases, like saying 103. Saying 103, the parable of the bandits. Jesus said, "Blessed is the one who knows where the bandits are going to enter. They can get up to assemble their defenses and be prepared to defend themselves before they arrive." This can be read in a couple of ways. Jesus may be referring to the threat of being attacked by actual people, which is a risk that comes from following secret and unconventional teachings. After all, Jesus is telling his disciples to reject conventional knowledge and earthly concerns. Partly this includes choosing not to comply with prescribed rituals and laws. Surely this has a high risk of inciting violent responses from the authority figures of normal society. And indeed, Christianity was persecuted in its early days. One can only imagine how persecuted were the groups of people like Gnostics who were practicing even more radical and inflammatory forms of alternative Christianity. The other way to read saying 103 and other similar passages about bandits is regarding the internal threats that Jesus' followers must reckon with. The other reason why persistence is needed along this path is that his disciples should expect resistance from themselves, just as they should expect external resistance from others. After all, the conventional modes of understanding the world have been built up over a lifetime. They will not go away quietly when supplanted by these new ways of knowing. However, as long as his disciples recognize this fact, they can remain vigilant and reject the voices within that continue to tempt them and pull them back to the material world. This is the true meaning behind all the imagery of seeds and roots. The seeds and roots are only as good as the soil. The disciples must lay down strong foundations before planting the seeds, because seeds and roots are vulnerable to a variety of threats, especially before they come to fruition. As saying 32 states, a city built and fortified on a high mountain can't fall, nor can it be hidden. Given its clarity and succinctness, saying 32 can be seen as the key to unlocking the more cryptic verses that have to do with seeds and roots. In this case, it's not organic matter, but the function of fortification is the same as that of good soil and healthy roots. One of the most critical teachings Jesus can convey to his disciples is the supreme importance of making sure they are adequately prepared for what they are about to embark on if they choose to seek the kingdom. For those who accept these terms, though, the fruits of their efforts are guaranteed. Children and clothing. These two things at first appear to be separate themes. Why are they being treated together? Well, primarily because the Gospel of Thomas itself repeatedly blends these images together. Furthermore, they bear a similar symbolic significance. When the image of clothing is invoked in the Gospel of Thomas, it is almost always either an admonition against worrying about the particularities of clothing, or some kind of parable involving the stripping of clothing. As a couple of examples of this first case, consider sayings 36 and 78. Saying 36, anxiety. Jesus said, "Don't be anxious from morning to evening, or from evening to morning about what you'll wear." Saying 78, into the desert. Jesus said, "What did you go out into the desert to see? A reed shaken by the wind? A person wearing fancy clothes, like your rulers and powerful people? They wear fancy clothes, but can't know the truth." In the previous section on seeds and roots, we saw many veiled calls to abandon material possessions and concerns. Throughout the Gospel of Thomas, clothing is one of the clearest examples used to illustrate this aspect of the quest for the kingdom. There are a few passages when Jesus' disciples ask him about rituals and prescriptions, the types of religious concerns that these disciples have been taught to treat as of ultimate importance. Jesus repeatedly either ignores or rebukes these requests. In saying 36, he responds specifically to their concerns about clothing by telling them flatly not to worry about it. It is simply not significant. Worrying about clothing will only make them anxious and is of no benefit. Saying 78 pushes this even further, displaying disdain for those who do care about clothing. Not only is it of no benefit to worry about clothing, but it is actually harmful. The people who wear fancy clothes cannot know the truth. This is, of course, because they are too attached to worldly concerns and material possessions to be able to seriously receive the more important spiritual teachings about the kingdom. Jesus defies conventional thought by claiming that rulers and powerful people can't know the truth. They're merely the rulers of an imperfect and corrupt kingdom, the earthly kingdom, as opposed to the heavenly one. So, who does have access to the truth of the heavenly kingdom? Who are the rulers of this kingdom? Jesus defies conventional thought even further by positing that children are, in fact, the rulers of the kingdom. Therefore, the wise will not turn to earthly rulers and those in positions of power for knowledge, but rather to children. This idea is conveyed very early in the gospel in saying 4. Saying 4, first and last. Jesus said, the older person won't hesitate to ask a little 7-day-old child about the place of life, and they'll live, because many who are first will be last, and they'll become one. The place of life is, of course, the kingdom, the crown jewel of the spiritual quest that Jesus is inviting his disciples to embark upon. Children are highly regarded by Gnostics for several reasons. First and foremost, children are necessarily closer to the One simply because they're younger. They split off from the source of creation more recently than adults, and they have subsequently spent less time on earth being polluted and disoriented by earthly distractions. Children are also a symbol of the oneness of the living Father and the kingdom. This is because they are, compared to adults, relatively genderless. Morphologically, members of the two sexes have not yet diverged as much in the childhood stage. Children also haven't been fully ensnared by the trappings of a strong sense of identity with one sex over the other. This inevitable divergence, like any divergence, is yet another thing that separates us from the One. To return to a childlike state, then, is characteristic of returning to the One. All of this will help us better understand the other passages about children, such as saying 46. Saying 46, greater than John the Baptizer. Jesus said, from Adam to John the Baptizer, no one's been born who's so much greater than John the Baptizer that they shouldn't avert their eyes. But I say that whoever among you will become a little child will know the kingdom and become greater than John. John the Baptizer clearly is an important figure, but he was still an adult. He baptized others, symbolically endowing them with a fresh start to life, a spiritual rebirth. So John had an important role in making others more childlike. But it is children who literally are starting life fresh. Furthermore, the reference to Adam is no afterthought. There are other references to Adam throughout the Gospel of Thomas, which are used as a point of contrast to the goals of Jesus and his disciples. Adam is a symbol of the loss of connection to the One. Partly this is because Adam was responsible for the biblical fall, which separated humanity from God. But even before that moment, Adam himself became corrupted when Eve came into being. Initially, Adam was genderless, complete, one. In being split, he and Eve became two. Returning to a childlike state is like returning to the version of Adam before Eve, a state of being aligned with the original oneness of the living Father. This is exactly what saying 22 is all about. Saying 22, making the two into one. Jesus saw some little children nursing. He said to his disciples, "These nursing children can be compared to those who enter the kingdom." They said to him, "Then we'll enter the kingdom as little children?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the two into one, and make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and so make the male and the female a single one, so that the male won't be male nor the female female. When you make eyes in the place of an eye, a hand in the place of a hand, a foot in the place of a foot, and an image in the place of an image, then you'll enter the kingdom. To enter the kingdom, all divisions and dualities must be collapsed back into unity, for unity is the very nature of the living Father and his kingdom. That's why the two must become one. The inner and outer must become one, and the upper and lower must become one. The male and female division is used as a concrete example of a division that Jesus' disciples must reconcile, because it is one of the primary ways that humans distinguish themselves. And, insofar as the basis for the male-female split is one that concerns matters of the flesh, it is essential to overcome the corrupt earthly state of life in which the light, or spirit within, is trapped in a cage of flesh. The nursing children are great exemplars of collapsing the male-female division, because at that age it is more difficult to distinguish males from females. At such a young age, we don't see nursing children as male or female, at least not as immediately as we do with adults. And more importantly, the children themselves are free from identification with that division. Typically, the only thing that gives away children as male or female to the outside observer is clothing. Finally, we come to the passages in the Gospel of Thomas which explicitly merge the imagery of clothing and children. As we've already seen, both are used as symbols of renouncing the material world. Saying 37 reinforces this further. Saying 37, seeing Jesus. His disciples said, "When will you appear to us? When will we see you?" Jesus said, "When you strip naked without being ashamed, and throw your clothes on the ground and stomp on them as little children would, then you'll see the Son of the Living One and won't be afraid." Here, we're given an additional layer of meaning in the form of the lack of shame. Imagine the nursing children again. They're just as unconcerned with the lack of clothing as they are with gender or sex. The reference to shame also recalls Adam and Eve, who brought the feeling of shame into the world when they ate from the tree of knowledge and saw themselves as naked. For Jesus' disciples to strip naked without feeling shame would be akin to that pristine, androgynous Adam. Stripping naked without shame would be a sign of surrendering attachment to the male-female division, which presumably would be one of the most difficult and final divisions to overcome. Similarly, not only removing, but actually stomping on the clothing symbolizes a full rejection of the earthly world and an appropriate amount of disdain for it. Let us consider one last passage, the parable presented in Saying 21. Saying 21, the parables of the field, the bandits, and the reaper. Mary said to Jesus, "Whom are your disciples like?" He said, "They're like little children living in a field which isn't theirs. When the owners of the field come, they'll say, 'Give our field back to us.' They'll strip naked in front of them to let them have it and give them their field. So I say that if the owner of the house realizes the bandit is coming, they'll watch out beforehand and won't let the bandit break into the house of their domain and steal their possessions. You, then, watch out for the world. Prepare to defend yourself so that the bandits don't attack you, because what you're expecting will come. May there be a wise person among you. When the fruit is ripened, the corpse and flesh. Continuing on with the feeling of urgency to guard against or escape imminent danger, Saying 60 leads us into our next pairing of themes in the Gospel of Thomas, the corpse and flesh. Saying 60, don't become a corpse. They saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb to Judea. He said to his disciples, "What do you think he's going to do with that lamb?" They said to him, "He's going to kill it and eat it." He said to them, "While it's living, he won't eat it, but only after he kills it and it becomes a corpse." They said, "He can't do it any other way." He said to them, "You too look for a resting place, so that you won't become a corpse and be eaten." Again, there are at least two ways to read this, as external danger or internal danger. On the one hand, Jesus continues to warn his disciples that whoever follows him is potentially putting themselves in the line of danger. Jesus realizes that his teachings are subversive. That is the point. In line with the Gnostic worldview, this earthly world is a polluted, corrupt version of the true kingdom. The corpse is a recurring symbol of that pollution. Remember, Jesus' promise to his disciples is that those who reach the kingdom will not taste death. But anything that is of this earthly world is on its way to be killed and consumed, just like this lamb. The internal danger, then, is that the disciples do not reach the kingdom before their time on earth runs out, whether by natural causes or by violence at the hands of the so-called bandits referenced throughout the gospel. Recall how in saying 50, Jesus says the sign of the living Father within is movement and rest. In urging his disciples to look for a resting place, he's again hammering home the point of directing all of one's energy to finding the kingdom, which is the place of rest. There is then some sense that the earthly life for humans is not all bad, at least not in the sense that it provides an opportunity to find the kingdom. We continue to get the sense that those who fail to find the kingdom while alive are forfeiting an opportunity that they will never get back. It's a bit unclear what the full implication of this is. Will those who fail to find the kingdom while on earth never return to the living Father, the One, or will they simply not be able to do so consciously? In any case, there's something very important about realizing the kingdom while still in the flesh. Perhaps that is what explains the ambiguity in the following verses about the body and soul, the flesh and spirit. Saying 29, spirit and body. Jesus said, "If the flesh came into existence because of spirit, that's amazing. If spirit came into existence because of the body, that's really amazing. But I'm amazed at how such great wealth has been placed in this poverty." Saying 87, body and soul. Jesus said, "How miserable is the body that depends on a body, and how miserable is the soul that depends on both." Saying 112, flesh and soul. Jesus said, "How awful for the flesh that depends on the soul. How awful for the soul that depends on the flesh." Saying 29 is particularly interesting because it implies that even Jesus doesn't know everything about flesh and spirit. He doesn't know which one preceded the other, why the flesh exists, or why the spirit was placed in the flesh. It's a rare moment in the text in which Jesus ceases to be the omniscient beacon of knowledge and is among us in contemplating the mysteries of existence. Nevertheless, Jesus is clear about the supremacy of soul and spirit over body and flesh. In saying 29, the body is poverty. In saying 87, Jesus pities those who are imprisoned by the body's desire for material things, other bodies, and the souls that belong to those bodies and therefore can never be freed. Saying 112 is a bit more intriguing, though. It's not as straightforward. There's more of a balance here. Instead of outright condemning flesh and lauding the soul, there is pity for both in their dependence on one another. If we think about it deeper, though, we can still interpret this saying in a way that is consistent with the Gnostic prioritization of soul over flesh. It is clear why it is awful for the soul to depend on the flesh. The realization of the soul's potential, like the mustard seed, like the yeast, depends on an imperfect, fleshy being's willingness and ability to essentially renounce itself and everything it has come to accept as true and real. The odds of that occurring are slim for most souls. The less straightforward part is why it is awful for the flesh to depend on the soul. Shouldn't the flesh be lucky to depend on the soul? Well, the difference is that the soul can exist independently, but the flesh cannot. Yet it is unfortunate if a soul, burdened by its prison of the flesh, cannot actualize itself on earth, but in some way the soul itself is imperishable. The flesh, on the other hand, does not exist independently. It is essentially just a fleeting manifestation of soul. Everything that is flesh will turn into a corpse. It is only living flesh while it is tethered to a soul. This brings us to saying 56, the world is a corpse. Jesus said, "Whoever has known the world has found a corpse. Whoever has found a corpse, of them the world isn't worthy." When you realize that all the material things on earth and the earth itself are just different forms of flesh, all bound to end up as corpses, then you realize that the world is itself a corpse. The world itself is unworthy of those who realize this fact, because those are the ones who have begun to walk the path toward the kingdom. As saying 2 notes, those who begin to seek will eventually find. But first, they will be disturbed. It is a disturbing conclusion to know that one's world is a corpse. But that realization is what propels one onward on the path of salvation, the state of rest that lies in the kingdom. Division and destruction. As mentioned previously, there's a feeling of danger pervading many of the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas. In some cases, Jesus is very explicit that he is intentionally inciting division and destruction. And yet this is the same Jesus who speaks of the divine light and weaves bucolic scenes into his parables. It's the same Jesus who seems to care for his disciples and even tells them at one point that they should feed the poor. How could this same figure be so proud about destroying the world? Well, the simple answer is that this world is foul and is, according to his teachings, already a corpse. But is there more going on here than Jesus merely acting as a harbinger of the literal destruction of the world? 2 of the plainest statements of Jesus' association with danger and destruction are sayings 10 and 82, each titled, Jesus and Fire. Saying 10, Jesus and Fire, 1. Jesus said, "I've cast fire on the world, and look, I'm watching over it until it blazes." Saying 82, Jesus and Fire, 2. Jesus said, "Whoever is near me is near the fire, and whoever is far from me is far from the kingdom." Saying 10 seems like a pretty clear statement of Jesus' intentions to burn down the world. He is an agent of destruction. Saying 82 is perhaps even more severe. If his followers want to find the kingdom, they have to go toward Jesus, toward the fiery destruction. All those previous sayings about bandits and other pursuers with whom Jesus' disciples must be prepared to reckon make more sense. Of course, they should expect some pushback. They are trying to destroy the world. Naturally, the disciples want some answers about what this destruction will look like, what the end of the world will look like. They approach Jesus about this very question, receiving a characteristically cryptic response in saying 18. Saying 18, beginning and end. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us about our end. How will it come?" Jesus said, "Have you discovered the beginning so that you can look for the end? Because the end will be where the beginning is. Blessed is the one who will stand up in the beginning. They'll know the end and won't taste death." At this point, we've learned enough from other sayings to be able to interpret this one. When Jesus says the end will be where the beginning is, he likely means two things. The first is that the beginning and end both refer to the same kingdom, that of the living Father, the One, the source of creation. The second meaning of this statement is to once again push his disciples toward the understanding that the end they are looking for is not in time or space. It is something that exists all around them in the present moment and is just waiting to be discovered. As Jesus explains in saying 51, what you're looking for has already come, but you don't know it. Those who can stand up are the ones who receive the Gnostic revelation, discover the treasure within, and know the end without tasting death, because they understand that there is no end, at least not in the conventional sense of the term. They realize that they come from and remain a part of something that is imperishable. The world they're used to will have to come to an end with that realization, as will their orientation to death. This is the moment of realization that is described in saying 111. Saying 111, those who are living won't die, too. Jesus said, "The heavens and the earth will roll up in front of you, and whoever lives from the living one won't see death." Doesn't Jesus say, "Whoever finds themselves, of them the world isn't worthy"? The end of this saying harkens back to saying 56, but now there's a bit of a twist. Whereas saying 56 was about finding a corpse, here it is about finding themselves. Those who know the world have found a corpse, but one comes to know the world in this way by finding themselves. That is why the statements are interchangeable. Knowing oneself in the Gnostic sense means knowing oneself to be connected to the living Father. When you know yourself in this way, the heavens and earth will roll up in front of you because they will be seen as they truly are. Corpses, illusions. Death is a phenomenon of the earthly world, so it too simply ceases to exert any real meaning or influence. Jesus then has not come to physically burn the world to the ground. That would not even be a necessary or meaningful act. This world was never really alive to begin with. Jesus is here to destroy the world in the sense that those who follow him will have their old views of the world completely torn apart. But, true to the Gnostic spirit of the text, only a select few can receive this form of revelation and salvation. This is why Jesus also speaks of himself as a divider rather than a bringer of peace. Finding the treasure of truth within and coming to see the world as a corpse is necessary for salvation from the corrupt material world. But this revelation is also something that would put one totally at odds with all else who continue to cling to the world. His subversive teachings will divide people, as saying 16 makes clear. Saying 16, not peace, but war. Jesus said, "Many people think that I've come to cast peace on the earth, and they don't know that I've come to cast divisions on the earth, fire, sword, and war. Where there are 5 in a house, there'll be 3 against 2, and 2 against 3, father against and son against father. They'll stand up and be one." What is the meaning, then, of the seemingly optimistic note on which saying 16 ends? As we'll see in the next section, Jesus has come to divide, but he has also come to unite. Recall that in the Gnostic worldview, the very nature of the world is division. That is not Jesus' doing. But in order to help others realize the original unity that stands behind all of creation and that lies within them, he must tear them apart from their current state of being, from their material possessions, from their friends and family, from everything around them. Before moving on to the next section, though, there's one more curious passage to examine, saying 72. Saying 72, not a divider. Someone said to him, "Tell my brothers to divide our inheritance with me." He said to him, "Who made me a divider?" He turned to his disciples and said to them, "Am I really a divider? What is the meaning of this?" This passage occurs long after saying 16, in which Jesus proudly owns up to being a divider. So why is he denying it here? Undoubtedly, this is a puzzling passage to interpret. One interpretation might be that, yes, Jesus is a divider, but not of trivial material objects like inheritance money. Alternatively, there is something potentially humorous here. One can almost imagine Jesus turning back to his disciples with a sly smile as he asks, "Am I really a divider?" As if to say, "See, I told you so." Some degree of mystery must remain unsolved with this passage, but it is a fun one to ponder. Unity. In the Gospel of Thomas, there are two sayings titled Unity, the first of which picks up right where we left off, with the image of a divided household that needs to be reconciled into a unified whole. Saying 48, Unity 1. If two make peace with each other in a single house, they'll say to the mountain, "Go away," and it will. Saying 49, Those who are chosen. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are one, those who are chosen, because you'll find the kingdom. You've come from there and will return there." The idea is that unity is the ultimate achievement. There's no object or force in the world that can measure up to it or stand in its way, not even a mountain. We get the sense, too, that this unity is all the stronger for having arisen out of division in the first place. Again, Jesus is a divider, but he divides so that he can unite. Recall all of Jesus' musings about the flesh and soul. The common theme is that the two are intertwined, and that this is an unfortunate state for them both. Perhaps the single house is the individual self. Each person on earth is a hopelessly discombobulated mess of flesh and soul. Jesus is like a surgeon who's come to sever the two so that they can be stitched back together in a more harmonious way. Saying 106, the other unity passage, is very similar to the first. Saying 106, unity. Jesus said, "When you make the two into one, you'll become children of humanity, and if you say, 'Mountain, go away,' it'll go." Once more, we're told to make the two into one, and again we see the image of the mountain. The main difference is the insertion of the phrase, "children of humanity." In the New Testament, Jesus often refers to himself as the Son of Man. Presumably, children of humanity means something quite similar. Turning the two into one, marrying the soul and flesh perhaps, would allow the disciples to become like Jesus himself. Like the eponymous Thomas, they would be like Jesus' twin. This all makes sense in line with Gnostic thinking, wherein the supreme God is spoken of simply as the One, or oneness. For a person to become one is the same as becoming more godlike or closer to the One, the source of creation, which Jesus refers to as the kingdom. But this is not a feasible goal for everyone, as sayings 23 and 49 remind us. Saying 23, those who are chosen, 1. Jesus said, I'll choose you, 1 out of 1,000, and 2 out of 10,000, and they'll stand as a single one. Saying 49, those who are chosen. Jesus said, blessed are those who are one, those who are chosen, because you'll find the kingdom. You've come from there and will return there. Again, it is characteristic of Gnostics to consider their revelations and paths to salvation as secret and not for public consumption. It's not made clear in the Gospel of Thomas what the criteria is for being chosen. How is he picking these 1 in 1,000 people? Perhaps the closest we get to an answer is saying 64. Saying 64, the parable of the dinner party. Jesus said, someone was planning on having guests. When dinner was ready, they sent their servant to call the visitors. The servant went to the first and said, my master invites you. They said, some merchants owe me money. They're coming tonight. I need to go and give them instructions. Excuse me from the dinner. The servant went to another one and said, my master invites you. They said, I just bought a house and am needed for the day. I won't have time. The servant went to another one and said, my master invites you. They said, my friend is getting married and I'm going to make dinner. I can't come. Excuse me from the dinner. The servant went to another one and said, my master invites you. They said, I've just bought a farm and am going to collect the rent. I can't come. Excuse me. The servant went back and told the master, the ones you've invited to the dinner have excused themselves. The master said to the servant, go out to the roads and bring whomever you find so that they can have dinner. Buyers and merchants won't enter the places of my Father. The main point of this parable is clear. Those who are fixated on material possessions and ties to worldly life are not worthy of the kingdom or learning anything about it. For most people, it is not easy to give up on the lives they're used to, the things they've come to consider important in life, in order to follow the radical teachings of some stranger. So it is clear why the proportion of chosen might be as slim as 1 in 1,000 or 2,000. It's clear who's being screened out, but still not entirely clear how the chosen are being identified. It could be that those who are chosen are, similar to the New Testament, the poor and the sick, since they are already more separated from the material world. But this doesn't feel entirely satisfying. From everything we've seen in the Gospel of Thomas, it seems that a willing renunciation of the earthly life is an important part of the spiritual process. Are those who are already destitute really capable of this? Ultimately, it seems more clear who is being excluded from the chosen and less clear who is being intentionally chosen. There's one more thing that's interesting about saying 64. Who is the master and who is the servant? Jesus certainly plays the role of master throughout the Gospel of Thomas, so it is easy to assume he is the master in this scenario, but ultimately, even he is simply a servant of the one. Perhaps the one somehow selects the chosen, and Jesus is merely the servant that seeks out and teaches those people, or at least some of them. There are a couple of instances in which Jesus references his role in the Holy Trinity. Saying 30, divine presence. Jesus said, where there are 3 deities, they're divine. Where there are 2 or 1, I'm with them. Saying 44, blasphemy. Jesus said, whoever blasphemes the Father will be forgiven, and whoever blasphemes the Son will be forgiven. But whoever blasphemes the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, neither on earth nor in heaven. Saying 30 may simply be a straightforward reference to the doctrine of the Trinity. Jesus is connected to the other two deities, but when they are all together, their divinity is complete. Saying 44 is a bit more curious. Its meaning depends on who the Father and Son are here. Usually the Father is God, the Creator, and the Son is Jesus Christ. But from a Gnostic perspective, the Creator is not the benevolent one, but rather the evil demiurge. Similarly, Jesus, while divine, can be seen as partly corrupt by virtue of being the son of this demiurge. If this is how we are to read the identity of the divine persons referenced here, then of course it's okay to blaspheme these two. However, throughout the Gospel of Thomas, the Father is used to refer to the One. It would be strange if one were permitted to blaspheme the One. Here is one alternative interpretation. Yes, the Father here means the One, and the Son means the Jesus of the Gospel of Thomas. The Holy Spirit, then, would be the aspect of the One that is present within each person, the treasure referenced in all the parables. Perhaps we should not be asking which is the superior of these three things, but rather, which thing would be the most vulnerable to being blasphemed? The one who is so transcendent and imperishable that no amount of blasphemy will touch it. The one is, after all, not the petty, vengeful demiurge God. The thing that would be really dangerous for one to blaspheme would be their own internal light, for that is the only key to the kingdom. To blaspheme it would be akin to abandoning the whole quest. It is unforgivable, not in the sense of some petty threat of punishment, but in terms of forfeiting one's own salvation. Eating and drinking. We come to the final section of themes. There are two reasons the verses about eating and drinking were saved until the end. One, some of the most enigmatic passages in the Gospel of Thomas are those that deal with eating and or drinking. Hence, saving them until the end allows you to approach them with more interpretive insight into the overall meaning of the text. And two, these themes weave many of the previous themes together. The concept of food harkens back to the themes of seeds and roots, as well as flesh, while the act of ingesting and digesting food and drink echoes the themes of destruction and unity, that something must be broken down first to then be integrated back into the whole. This latter reflection is the lens through which we can examine saying 7, which is surely one of the most puzzling verses in the Gospel, especially when read for the first time so early in the text. Saying 7, the lion and the human. Jesus said, "Blessed is the lion that's eaten by a human and then becomes human. But how awful for the human who's eaten by a lion and the lion becomes human." At this point, hopefully something about this passage will strike you as familiar. It is actually reminiscent of 3 passages we previously examined, sayings 29, 87, and 112, or spirit and body, body and soul, and flesh and soul. These are the passages in which Jesus muses on the relationship between these two contrasting aspects of the self. If in saying 7 you swap out lion for flesh and human for soul, watch what happens. Blessed is the flesh that's eaten by a soul and then becomes soul. But how awful for the soul who's eaten by flesh and the flesh becomes soul. As he expressed in the 3 aforementioned verses, Jesus is again lamenting the fate of the soul for having been consumed and trapped in the prison of flesh. But in the first half of the verse, he suggests that the soul can consume the flesh, turning flesh into soul. This seems very much in line with what Jesus is calling upon his disciples to do. Tap into the soul and renounce the flesh, so that soul can dominate and lead them to salvation, transmuting the corpse-bound flesh into something that will not taste death. An interesting occurrence, which may or may not have been intentional, is that the seventh to last passage closely echoes saying 7, saying 108, becoming like Jesus. Jesus said, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me, and I myself will become like them. Then what's hidden will be revealed to them." Just as saying 7 depicts a reciprocal act of consumption between lion and human, saying 108 establishes a similar relationship between Jesus and his disciples. The message is likely very similar as well. Jesus, in the Gospel of Thomas, stands as an exemplar of ultimate spiritual attainment. Essentially, he is soul incarnate. So for a disciple to imbibe him is like for a lion to consume a human and thereby become part of the human. Here, Jesus is saying that by following his teachings, a disciple can enter into the same state of living through the soul, merging back into the original light, the one which previously was hidden but now will be revealed. We can't move on from saying 108 without acknowledging saying 13, the other instance in which Jesus references a disciple drinking from him. Saying 13, Thomas' confession. Jesus said to his disciples, "If you were to compare me to someone, who would you say I'm like?" Simon Peter said to him, "You're like a just angel." Matthew said to him, "You're like a wise philosopher." Thomas said to him, "Teacher, I'm completely unable to say whom you're like." Jesus said, "I'm not your teacher. Because you've drunk, you've become intoxicated by the bubbling spring I've measured out." He took him aside and told him 3 things. When Thomas returned to his companions, they asked, "What did Jesus say to you?" He said to them, "If I tell you one of the things he said to me, you'll pick up stones and cast them at me, and fire will come out of the stones and burn you up." Jesus tells his disciple Thomas that he has drunk from his spring. By the logic of saying 108, that means Thomas has become like Jesus, and Jesus is like Thomas. And, of course, it is Thomas who is singled out here. Remember, Thomas means twin. That's the whole reason why the Gospel of Thomas is named as such. Here, Jesus is saying he is not Thomas' teacher. Rather, he is Thomas' twin, for Thomas has absorbed his teachings and become like Jesus. What makes this one of the most frustrating passages, however, is that we never come to learn what those 3 things said to Thomas were. But certainly we can imagine some verses in this gospel that would fit the bill for statements that are incendiary enough to invite a stoning. The passages in which Jesus tells his disciples they must hate their parents come to mind, for instance. Or did Jesus say something to Thomas, acknowledging Thomas' own divinity or identity with God, something that would be perceived as blasphemous? We can never know for sure, but it is an engaging topic for speculation. We continue along with the theme of drinking in saying 74, which is another peculiar and enigmatic one. Saying 74, the empty well. He said, "Lord, many are gathered around the well, but there's nothing to drink." Part of what makes this one hard to interpret is that it's been translated in different ways that fundamentally change the meaning. This translation seems to hearken back to Jesus' statement in saying 38 that there will be days when you'll look for me, but you won't be able to find me. In other translations, however, the second half of the verse is translated as something like, "But there's nobody in the well." In both cases, the well is empty. But in the latter case, the message seems to be something like, many are called, but few are chosen. This latter interpretation would be supported by the fact that the very next verse, saying 75, reads, many are waiting at the door, but those who are won will enter the bridal chamber, which again seems like a restatement of the idea that many are called, but few are chosen. In any case, it seems like the point is that it's not always easy or straightforward to receive or follow Jesus' teachings. Perhaps it is for that reason that Jesus must constantly encourage his disciples with reminders not to give up, that those who seek should continue to seek until they find. There are many more passages about eating and drinking we could delve into, but in winding down, let us turn our attention from the cryptic to the concrete, the passages in which Jesus' disciples ask him about prescriptions relating to diet, fasting, and the like, with the first such instance being saying 6. Saying 6, public ritual. His disciples said to him, do you want us to fast? And how should we pray? Should we make donations? And what food should we avoid? Jesus said, don't lie, and don't do what you hate, because everything is revealed in the sight of heaven. For there's nothing hidden that won't be revealed, and nothing covered up that will stay secret. At first glance, it seems like Jesus is just ignoring and dismissing these questions so that he can return to his cryptic philosophizing. However, upon closer examination, his answer is relevant and quite meaningful. He's saying that the disciples should not follow strict laws or codes of conduct just for their own sake. There's no point to doing things they don't actually want to do, for it will become clear which things are being done sincerely and which are not. Saying 14 expounds upon a similar line of thinking. Saying 14, public ministry. Jesus said to them, if you fast, you'll bring guilt upon yourselves, and if you pray, you'll be condemned, and if you make donations, you'll harm your spirits. If they welcome you when you enter any land and go around in the countryside, heal those who are sick among them, and eat whatever they give you, because it's not what goes into your mouth that will defile you. What comes out of your mouth is what will defile you. Again, the disciples shouldn't be forcing themselves to do things like fasting and praying and making donations if they don't want to, since doing so will only keep them further from the kingdom. The kingdom, remember, is something that must be found from within, and if you're trying to resist your own sense of what you should and shouldn't do, then you're keeping yourself at arm's length from that innermost part of yourself. That which comes out of your mouth are the lies that Jesus references in saying 6. Don't lie, and most importantly, don't lie to yourself. When it comes to following conventional religious practices like fasting, Jesus wants his disciples to see such rituals in a different way, as saying 27 suggests. Saying 27, fasting and Sabbath. If you don't fast from the world, you won't find the kingdom. If you don't make the Sabbath into a Sabbath, you won't see the Father. Just as the demiurge is a perversion of the one, and the earthly world is a perversion of the kingdom, so too are the earthly rituals perversions of the spiritual practices that really matter. Fasting from food for a little while is not important. What's important is fasting from the world altogether. That is how you find the kingdom. Toward the end of the gospel, in saying 104, the topic of fasting is approached again. Saying 104, prayer and fasting. They said to Jesus, come, let's pray and fast today. Jesus said, what have I done wrong? Have I failed? Rather, when the groom leaves the bridal chamber, then people should fast and pray. Sometimes this passage is interpreted to mean that Jesus abstains from praying and fasting because those activities are reserved for those who have sinned, whereas Jesus is spiritually perfect. He's done nothing wrong. However, an equally valid interpretation would be that Jesus is essentially asking himself, where did I go wrong, such that these disciples of mine are still asking about prayer and fasting? Haven't they been listening to a word I've said? The groom and bridal chamber image appears more than once in the gospel and seems tied to the idea of finding the kingdom through unity. So Jesus is perhaps saying to his disciples, once you find the kingdom, you can pray and fast to your heart's content. But first, there's more important work to be done. Before concluding, we need to take a moment to look at the final passage in the Gospel of Thomas, saying 1:14. Saying 1:14, Peter and Mary. Simon Peter said to them, Mary should leave us, because women aren't worthy of life. Jesus said, look, am I to make her a man, so that she may become a living spirit too? She's equal to you men, because every woman who makes herself manly will enter the kingdom of heaven. As the final saying, this passage is inherently deserving of close contemplation, but it's also crying out for interpretation, not just because of its potential importance and enigmatic nature, but also because of how morally troubling it may seem to the present-day reader. Women aren't worthy of life is an extremely sexist statement, even by ancient standards. For that reason, we want Jesus to do the right thing here and put Simon Peter in his place with an unequivocal refutation of that statement. What we get instead is a statement from Jesus that appears sexist in its own right, seemingly supporting part of what Simon Peter says. It's not a comforting note to close on, so let's try to find a more graceful message here. The first part of what Jesus says sounds good. Mary is equal to you men. But then he suggests that only women who make themselves more manly will enter the kingdom of heaven. Surely that is the part that gives us the most pause. But this is consistent with what Jesus has said throughout the Gospel of Thomas. It's just not the full story. It's true that women must make themselves more manly to enter the kingdom of heaven, but it's also true that men must make themselves more womanly to do the same. Divisions like sex and gender must be transcended to enter the kingdom of heaven. Furthermore, Jesus has repeatedly made it clear that there are no shortcuts for anybody. If Jesus were to make Mary a man, he would essentially be giving her a shortcut that the men have not been afforded. She's equal to them in the work they must do and the challenges they must overcome. Taking this one step further, recall all those things Jesus said about the lion becoming human, or those who drink from his mouth becoming more like him, and vice versa. Perhaps Mary is not only permitted to remain amongst the male disciples, but is actually a necessary key part of the process for them. Perhaps the best way for men to become more womanly is to have a woman in their presence, walking the same path and imbibing the same teachings. Perhaps even Jesus himself as a male benefits from Mary's presence in this way. In the end, the goal for all is the same: to renounce identification with either sex and instead return to the childlike androgyny of oneness. Afterward. With so much said already, there's little left to say about the text of the Gospel of Thomas itself. At this point, all that is necessary is one final message of encouragement. Sometimes we encounter a text for which we are so starved of contextual information and which is so far out of our comfort zone that we feel we are unable to even make a dent in the thing in terms of extracting meaning. We need someone to get us started, to loosen up the earth a bit, so to speak. But the pickaxe is now in your hands. Do not rest only on the words in this synopsis as total and authoritative. There is still so much left to excavate from the Gospel of Thomas. The dozens of passages we simply did not have space for, and the multitude of alternate interpretations for the passages that we did dissect. The true value in a text like this lies in the process of discovery, and not necessarily the treasure that is discovered. By swinging that pickaxe, you are penetrating deeper into the crust of this text, but you're also strengthening the muscles that will help you dig through other complex and enigmatic texts, more religious scriptures, poems, philosophical treatises, or whatever else you might get your hands dirty with. Before you know it, you uncover the brightest treasure of all, the realization that the layers of sediment you've been scraping away are not just those that obscure the meaning of one or more texts, but those that obscure the deepest recesses of your own mind and soul. Like Thomas, you have drunk from the bubbling spring and become intoxicated by the unparalleled personal value of literary analysis. And while any promises of immortality lie well beyond the scope of this book, this companion guide has hopefully been of some avail in inching you onward toward whatever kingdom you seek.